So the idea of relationship has arisen lately and just was a topic that I thought would be interesting to riff on in this space. I attended a gathering, sort of a fringe spiritual, non-religious spiritual gathering recently, and the topic was sort of centered around relationships. And so I figured it'd be neat to unpack what was talked about there at a high level, at least. Yeah. And then the other thing I stumbled on, as we tend to do on YouTube, I stumbled on a video that was just like the simplest way to explain Einstein's theory of relativity. And it's basically just that everything exists in relationship to everything else. Probably the very, very overly simplified version of the theory of relativity. I'm not even anywhere near a physicist, so I don't understand it outside of hearing people talk about it like that. But it makes sense, right? And it sort of jives with my understanding of at least how some describe emptiness in Buddhism is that forms are empty of independent existence, meaning that there's nothing that exists independently of everything. Try to find something that is existing without some spatial or temporal reference to literally everything else. You can't do it. So relationship is an interesting thing to think about, thing to contemplate. And if you are watching this and anything like me, especially those that are drawn to more radical ideas around reality, such as non-duality, my guess is relationships are hard. Relationships with respect to other people or with respect to what appears to be ourself, for a variety of reasons, right? Because we probably question, I know I do, question the existence of these relationships. Are they real, or are they a perceptual anomaly based in an illusion of how reality is perceived? Anyway, so figured it'd be neat to riff on that a little bit. So this talk I heard basically took relationship and put it into 4 categories. Relationship with self, relationship with other, specifically other sort of like social context, other human beings. It's all through a human-centric perspective. So that's 2. Relationship with nature, the natural world, and then relationship with the transcendent, the ineffable mystery of whatever seems to undergird everything. God, whatever we want to call it. So it seems as though, I guess here's a question: can any phenomena be pointed to or described that isn't a relationship between, one of those things? And what's as I contemplate this, again, sort of no agenda, no objective, just hit record and have an idea and talk about it. And maybe it goes somewhere interesting, or maybe it just doesn't, and it just is worse than when I started. But whatever. Anyway, so what's arising is, the skandhas, I think is the term they use in Buddhism, or the aggregates of experience. And so another way that I like to think of that is all experience is made up of these fundamental building blocks of reality insofar as it's perceived by me and seemingly by all human beings. It's sort of like the raw material of reality, of experience. And I like it because it's obvious, but it's also like it can really cut through the typical perceptual frameworks that we have. Anyway, so and I actually don't remember exactly what the skandhas in Buddhism are. So if you're interested in that, look it up on YouTube. There's tons of videos of people who can speak about it more intelligently than me. But just that idea. So, the senses and cognition, right? Like everything that exists in experience is one of the 5 bodily senses or cognition, thoughts. There's a challenge. If you haven't already done this, try to find anything. Try to find literally anything, not an object per se, but anything, any facet of experience. Try to find something that doesn't contain one or multiple parts of just the 6 sense gates. A common one for those of us that are not visually impaired is the visual field, which is what? We are conditioned to think, believe, assume that the visual field is light that is being reflected around different surfaces and is coming back to the eyes and then is being transcribed in the brain to then project an image in the mind about what is there. And maybe that's true, but it's a belief, it's an assumption. We don't know that to be true at all. That's just a mechanism of what appears to be the physical world, but we don't know that. What we know is color, shapes are appearing and generating what we can call a visual field that we then interpret, or I should say that is interpreted to be something like a screen or a room. So that's just the visual field, right? And then there's the sound field, there's the body sense field, touching things. That's just body sense arising. So when there seems to be touching, like two hands touching, that's an extrapolation. Really, there is this sensation of what I call hands touching, what looks like hands touching, what sounds like hands touching. If you rub them fast enough, it would be what smells like hands touching, because it'll be a burning smell. I don't think we can bring the taste sense into this. And then, of course, the sixth sense in this case, which is cognition, is sort of like ubiquitously woven through all of it. The mind, the thoughts, the cognition is an overlay of everything happening in the 5 bodily senses to make sense of it. Okay, so now, how does that tie into relationship? And this is where, I don't know, I don't know that it's almost like maybe the very idea of relationship falls apart. As I alluded to earlier, like, people watching this or interested in non-duality may struggle with the human-oriented story of relationship, because the patterns of how thinking works and how the reality is perceived, there may be a complete collapse of relationship, or just a serious alteration. And let's just think of an example. So, the visual field. So I'm sitting in a room with a recording device in front of me, but the room is full of what appear to be objects. But again, those are all thoughts about what the visual field is presenting. But what is it actually? So to use this question of relationship, does the visual field have relationship as a fundamental characteristic? That talk that I went to, that's kind of what they said, is basically that reality equals relationship. That what is understood as reality is always relationship. So as I reflect on that, I'm like, but is it? I don't know. And that's, I guess, what we're exploring here is relationship fundamentally real to reality, existence, or is it just fundamentally real to the augmented reality that the mind has created? Sort of like the hive mind of humanity over the thousands of years, apparently, that humans have existed. Is this just a collective myth of how reality is relational? Or is it fundamentally real to the absolute nature of existence? So to go back to the visual field, and I think the visual field is a good one to examine, because it's, again, if for those of us who are non-impaired, I would not be the person to help contemplate for anyone who is visually impaired. But for us who are non-visually impaired, it's a great sense gate to explore when contemplating things like this, contemplating what is real. And the question here is relationship real, or is it an augmented facet of what is real? So the visual field. My gut response here, and again, these are just thoughts, so, but is that it's not. Because it just is. The visual field as is being revealed, not even as it's being revealed, just as it is now, there is just that. The relationship in the visual field would be the mind, a thought coming in saying that I am here, and I am, and the visual field is out there, so I am somehow separate from the visual field. But what is that? You know, if we talk about how the building blocks of reality are the senses and cognition, that would suggest then that the content of those, or well, I guess the content of what thoughts describe about those would be inherently an abstraction out of what is absolutely real, rather than real itself. So again, visual field. Yeah, I mean, I could go both ways, because in the typical way which we think of things as relational, it's dualistic. It's separation. It's subject, object. It's me and someone else, or it's me and another person, or me and God, or me and nature. But that is the arising of a belief that there is real separation between me and whatever else. So in that respect, it seems as though relationship is an illusion. And not that there's anything wrong with living a life or operating this apparent life with respect and reverence and appreciation of the relational aspect. But again, we're pondering here what's real. I'm pondering here. So that's that. But then the last thing I'll end on here is the relationship around, even in the visual field. It's almost like maybe there is a fundamental relationship, because like I'm looking right now at a frame hanging on the wall, what appears to be a frame hanging on the wall, and there is a particular shape, rectangular shape, and there are colors and contrast of those colors from the other colors arising. The wall, which is boring white, as my wife would probably say. But so there is sort of a relationship there. a necessary, a fundamental relationship, because without the contrast, there would be no, it would be indeterminate. There would be nothing. The visual field would be nothing, because there would be no contrasting relationship between the arisings. So, and then maybe fodder for a different topic. I don't want to go too far down this hole or too long, but maybe something to try is examining and exploring the relationship between the visual field and the other sensations, the other sense gates. For example, I just heard a bird, and there's an instant relationship there between, I heard a sound arose that the mind seemingly instantly said bird. So there's an apparent relationship there, but is there really a relationship? Or, like this, clapping. You can see the clapping and hear it. So there's an apparent relationship between that visual data and the audio sound. But is it real? I don't know. I don't know if we would ever know for sure, but I'll just leave it that I find it helpful to just contemplate the relative, or just contemplate the existence or reality or truth of things like this that we sort of operate with in our day-to-day lives.